the Prime Minister and Premier Smith seem to be getting along. Pipeline deal done. Everybody's happy. Everybody's shaking hands.
The Premier's been surprised by how open he is. All the other leaders, I mean, they're all playing really nice. I don't think that the Premier has a reason to be mad with Mark Carney
Does she
right
need
now.
one? Does she need one?
I think it's kind of unfortunate that he did get booed because it just doesn't send the same message that maybe we want internationally, especially as we're getting some tariffs coming down on us.
She's deciding publicly to stand with Carney and to laugh with Carney and take photos with Carney, and she definitely would not have been doing that with Justin Trudeau.
Once you're in Stampede and you're in the parties and you're listening to people, there's always like a level of energy closely correlated with the price of oil. This year's Stampede felt like $100 a barrel oil. Whether non-Carney supporters want to admit it or not, there is a level of optimism. Things are going the way that people have hoped they would go for a long time. It's really hard for Danielle Smith to stand up and say Mark Carney's not standing up for Alberta, he's not doing a good job, when the feedback you're getting from this 10-day event is like, actually, we're feeling pretty good right now.
Markham Hislop, he says a recent agreement between Alberta and Ontario, Danielle Smith and Doug Ford, is a national betrayal.
It's absolutely political alignment. Doug Ford asked, and the Prime Minister said from the very beginning, we are going to support Ontario's auto industry. Trudeau and Biden lined up against China. In 2024, they brought in those 100% EV tariffs. Then Trump came along and kneecapped the whole thing. Now, Ontario's sitting there going, oh my God, what do we do? Where are we going to sell our automobiles? Ontario has asked, and Carney has agreed, they're going to support that industry. Ford's point of view, for him to line up with one of the other big provinces, Alberta, that sends the message to Carney, hey, I've got political support in our negotiations. I have more leverage, so I can get more from the federal government to support my auto industry. And what Smith is doing is she's piling demand after demand after demand. I want a pipeline. She's putting public pressure on them so she has leverage. Folks, there are major risk factors. This may not be the great deal that you think it is.
My neighbors are choked. They voted for this guy and he ran away. He abandoned his duty to them.
You're kind of trying to convince longtime Conservative voters to vote against the party they've always voted for. You think that they're mad enough to vote against the Conservatives for an independent candidate?
Absolutely. And I'm not the one who's saying that. It's all of our neighbors who are saying that. People are choked. Keurig sold us out to the angry guy from Ottawa. For us to have an election and then promptly have to go back another $2 million by-election because the guy we just voted in, who asked us for a mandate, suddenly turns around and says, no, I don't think so. Vote this guy in instead. It didn't sit right with me. And I'm like, I looked around, said somebody should do something about it. So I looked at what was happening when Mr. Keurig stepped down and said, that's not right. So I stood up. Victory for me is eating enough of his numbers that he's done. It's that simple.
It's inevitable. 2040, 2050, I mean, our future is electrified.
And I think it's interesting to see vehicle manufacturers, some of them very bullish on EVs, and some of them are scaling back their production of EVs and extending their plans on how long they'll continue to produce internal combustion vehicles, gas, diesel, and the like. Let's also recognize that the electricity that's charging these EVs is coming from natural gas or coal. But if there is quite literally a solar-powered electric vehicle, then what's the objection? I like this from Corradetti Motorsports. Says EVs have become a political statement which has hampered their adoption rate here in North America. Ken K says, Jespo, in 20 years, you are going to be loving your electric Jeep. RH says, drop the ridiculous tariff on Chinese EVs, invest in electrical infrastructure. Electrification is the future. Backward culture, politics, and entrenched interests are the problems. I think that's an intuitive comment. An Edmonton councillor goes nuclear.
I would think that maybe the incumbents would have been aware of that. I've been able to adjust my schedule.
Point of order, that was so rude. F you, Joanne, right? F you.
So, your first thought when you heard it?
Is Sarah having a bad day? And I think she immediately knew that she made a mistake. But you want politicians to be passionate. We went from like 2 to 10 in like a second.
Emily just says, whoa. Gizmo says that is not the kind of chatter for a meeting. Tony says, poor Sohi. Jillian says, seriously, there's got to be something else going on.
Maybe the you was a little too far. But hey, she said sorry.
Sarah says, we sat for 60 hours over the last 7 days, so it's not a stretch to understand why tempers are short. This was all anybody was asking me about this weekend. The majority of people, not all, but the majority of people that talked to me about it said that they didn't mind it.
We do want a little bit more professionalism. We want cooler heads to prevail.
What do you think?
This is a relay project. Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
Welcome to episode 1001 of Real Talk. Everybody, thanks for being here. Jespersen here alongside Professor John Hicks, the intrepid technical. Well, I just thought you deserved a promotion after a big day yesterday, 1,000 shows.
Well, I think we're doing a disservice to our guest today, calling me a professor.
Well, no, he's a distinguished professor.
Distinguished.
So he's already. What I've learned about academia, and Dr. W. Andy Knight can clarify when we welcome him to the show in just a quick second. Is that my understanding in the halls of academia, these very well-earned titles come. We sort of like flippantly throw things around. We know somebody that works at a university, and we say, "Oh, they're a professor." Well, it turns out they may not be. They may be an associate professor.
Oh, for sure.
They could be a lecturer. They could be a session instructor.
So is distinguished the top tier?
And then I think there's like professor, and then there's like distinguished professor, and then the professor emeritus. I think is where you also may want to get it. I think that's.
I'm sure.
I don't want to say. I don't want to say when they put you out to pasture, but Professor Emeritus are the ones that sit there and sort of call their own shots. But as you've alluded to, Andy Knight will join us in just a quick second. This is an example. We talked about this yesterday. Welcome to the show, everybody. Thanks for being here. I recognize Kathy right out of the gates in our live chat, powered by Park Power, which looks a little differently, by the way. We'll get to that in a second. But Kathy says, I missed the July 21st episode 1000. She said I was on the road, so I'll have to catch it later. But a belated congrats on 1,000 episodes. Kathy, thanks to you. Safe journey. Hope you had a wonderful trip wherever you're going. But one of the things that we discussed yesterday as we waxed and reminisced and looked ahead, and I mean also dropped an exclusive on you as well with Michael Walters' mayoral announcement, but the fact that the show is built on relationships. And Andy Knight is an example of a guest that's joined us several times through our first 4 years and change on a number of different subjects. And a while ago, I would say it was about 6 months ago, he was with us and he was talking to us about a report that he was working on. He's a political scientist, long time. The guy's been recognized around and lectured around the world as a result of his expertise. But the Canadian Forces, the organization, commissioned Dr. Knight to do a study on extremism within the forces. And so when these arrests went down in Quebec a couple of weeks ago, these terrorism charges laid, including 2 members of the Canadian Forces, stockpiled weapons that have been stolen. These are, sounds weird to call them your weapons, Canadians, but these are weapons that belong to the Canadian Forces, stolen for illicit purposes, or at least that's what police alleged. Obviously, Dr. Knight was the first one that we wanted to reach out to, so we're gonna get into that. This is an example, I think, of how this show covers stories in many circumstances over a course of weeks, months, or even years, and we're going to figure out what this story is all about, and at the end of the day, why it all matters to you. At the end of the day, people are wondering, are the Canadian Forces compromised? Now, some of you, common sense folks, will argue that, 1 or 2 bad apples does not ruin an entire batch, and of course, we recognize the incredible sacrifice and service that thousands of Canadian men and women continue to live, both here on Canadian soil and around the world. But there is an issue, and it's on the radar of the Canadian Forces, and so this is a story we wanted to get into. I also wanted to let you know before this episode's up, we're going to touch on a couple of other stories that are making news today. Leading up to our episode coming up on July 24th, that's a Thursday, the entire episode will be dedicated to our beloved town of Jasper, as that community marks the 1-year anniversary of that wildfire that decimated buildings, that flattened entire neighborhoods, but of course brought out the best. Not suggesting there haven't been challenges and that challenges don't remain, that some folks' lives haven't been changed forever, but it brought out the best in thousands and thousands of people. On the 24th, we'll get into that, but Alberta's Premier making news ahead of time, a report out suggesting that the province basically interfered by trying to insert itself into the firefighting effort in a national park. The province basically interfered with those firefighting efforts. This, the 22nd of July, that's a year ago today, as this fire was approaching. The 23rd, when all hell broke loose, and on the 24th, as basically the world gasped at the devastation that was unfolding there. Alberta's premier wants an apology for the report. Alberta's mayor says they're not going to issue an apology, but also Richard Ireland, who will be joining us out of the gates on the 24th, basically says we're not looking to pick a fight with the province. We're not apologizing. We're not looking to pick a fight. Ireland says it's regrettable, my paraphrase, it's regrettable that this thing's being politicized. And why is it being politicized, right? That's the question that people have to ask. We'll dig into that today. Plus, I want to touch on a story. This is a concerning one, reported, understandably, by the Globe and Mail. Globe and Mail journalist Carrie Tait, you've heard her here on the show before, based on her, I'm going to call it, fearless coverage of Alberta politics. And I choose that word with intent. A Globe and Mail reporter, Carrie Tait, who you know, investigating allegations of political interference at Alberta's provincial health authority, that's Alberta Health Services. Obviously, we're talking about the alleged scandal, that procurement scandal involving MH Care. This is the story everybody's been talking about, right? Well, Carrie Tait is basically being followed. She's being surveilled. She's being harassed. Wow. There's these anonymous social media accounts, in particular on X, that are posting photos of her out, like grabbing lunch with political staffers. Sort of like hinting or alleging this, that, or the other. You know, alleging, for example, if Carrie Tait's out with a political staffer or a former political staffer for lunch, then that person must be the source, right, for all of her reporting. So what does this do? It brings a lot of heat onto Carrie Tait. It brings a lot of heat onto these political staffers. I think it's safe to suggest that in this line of work, we receive information from a ton of different sources. Some of it's credible, some of it's not. But we also mix and mingle, just like you do in your line of work, with people that are affiliated with or associated with the players in your industry, right? If you want to get an interview with the Prime Minister, chances are you have some sort of relationship with staffers in the Prime Minister's office. If you want to bring a minister on or a CEO of a big company to talk about a story that's relevant to the audience, then you're working the channels that you've established in some circumstances over 15 or 20 or 25 years in journalism. That doesn't mean that if we have a hot scoop on, for example, a mayoral race in a city or something that's happening with the board of a publicly traded corporation, that you can draw direct lines to people we know that work at that place, thus implicating these people in the situation, right? It's ridiculous. But these accounts have gone on to talk about, for example, Carrie Tait picking up her personal prescriptions at a pharmacy. Yeah. They've gone on to so she's being followed. She's being surveilled. The Premier's office says basically we don't comment on reports or allegations that are made from anonymous Twitter accounts that have no connection to us. I'm not implying that somebody in the Premier's office is following Carrie Tait around, but I can confirm, based on obvious common sense, that there's a strained relationship between Ms. Tait and the Premier's office. People are calling this out. The difficult part about all of this is when you've got these anonymous accounts that are making these things happen. And to let people know, the Globe and Mail report, and we'll get into it later in the show in more fulsome fashion, does confirm that the tweets and the posts have been flagged. You know, in other words, people are reaching out to the social media platform to whatever degree that can be effective, saying, hey, this is obviously not acceptable. But I think that this is something not just impacting Ms. Tait and something not just impacting people in the journalism or storytelling industries, but this is something that should put a chill through everybody.
Everyone,
right? Journalists are being followed, surveilled, harassed at pharmacies.
And to a certain degree, we know that in this day and age, you give up some of your privacy. Like, you can be videotaped everywhere. Closed circuit cameras are everywhere. Coldplay. Yeah, but that stuff is really scary. This is actually kind of weird because I watched The Firm last night, old school movie with Tom Cruise, where he's surveilled by the law firm that he's working for, and they like bug his house and everything. But yeah, it is scary these days, especially when it's done anonymously. If it was an account with a real name and they're like, hey, I was out for lunch, I saw this, here's a scoop. Yeah. Okay, that's one thing. But when it's picking up your groceries and it's an anonymous account and you feel like you're being followed, that's when it gets scary.
I'm doing a quick Google search. Althea Raj, Gerald Butts, dinner. Let's see if this gives us anything. Here it is. When was this? Was this before the This might have been before the 2019 election. So here it is, Canada Proud. You guys know that advocacy group. That's one way to describe them. Canada Proud posted this photo. This was posted on the 30th of September, 2019. Now, Althea Raj was the debate moderator for the televised debate leading up to that 2019 election. Here it is, #spotted. A photo has leaked showing debate moderator Althea Raj meeting with Gerald Butts, Justin Trudeau's, they describe him as Justin Trudeau's disgraced top advisor. They asked, does this seem fishy to you? Now, I guess the implication by posting a photo like that, and it is an interesting photo, isn't it? Because people wonder, well, what are they doing here? Is she feeding Butts the questions ahead of time? Or maybe even worse, is Butts feeding her the questions ahead of time? Is she giving him a heads up? Do the Liberals have an unfair advantage in the debate? In the sense that these two, perhaps a friendly relationship, or obviously a friendly relationship, we're sharing intel ahead of the debate that would disadvantage his opponents, like the Conservative candidate at the time.
Sure, but the difference is they're in a public place.
Yeah.
They're meeting, they're in a bar or a restaurant or whatever. It's a really different than, like, this story feels like intimidation. When you're getting pictures of yourself out getting groceries or whatever, you're trying to instill fear.
So you kind of wonder, like, and like you said, like, if you're out in public, you can be photographed and the photographs can be posted. Is it interesting that these two are meeting? Yeah. Is it out of line? Well, I guess that depends on what they were talking about. Did she have, or does Althea Raj, for example, if she hears about this, she's like, why are you guys dragging this up 6 years later? But it's an example that immediately pops to mind of a journalist. This is not an example of being doxxed. They're not sharing her personal, her home address. They're not putting her personal cell phone number out there. They're not showing her license plate. But at the same time, what's the purpose of posting a photo like this? I suppose to infuse doubt in the process, to hurt the credibility of the debate, or most directly, the debate moderator, right? So there's an example. But do we know if Althea Raj had lunch earlier that day, or had brunch the next morning with a Conservative advisor to talk to them? Are we pretending like there's no connections between people in industry? These are the questions that we'll ask. But I think we can probably all agree, and quite frankly, if you disagree, you're wrong. We can all agree that it's completely inappropriate what's happening to Carrie Tait. So we'll be looking to the Real Talk live chat on that. I see, what are the purple crowns again now on the live chat for people that are watching on YouTube? These are like our top commentators. Is that how that works? I see some ranked number one. Jillian's very happy. She's ranked number one out of the gates today. I see Matthew as well. We've got some folks here. Ben knows that he's going to have to work a little harder in the chat today, Ben, with your number 3 ranking, but I have faith you can pull it off. It just goes to show that your engagement here is valuable and is being recognized, and we sure appreciate it. I also saw here from Matthew a comment that said on how professors are titled. Said they could also, for example, be an instructor. Says the U of A uses instructors a lot now as well. It could be PhD candidates or recent grads. He says they're cheaper than professors, but they have no job security. Yeah, you might be right. They've also got more freedom, I guess, to go do whatever they like. Let's ask Andy Knight. This guy, a distinguished professor at the University of Alberta, political scientist and a subject matter expert. Welcome back to the show. It's nice to see you, my friend.
Thank you, Ryan. I hope you can hear me okay.
We hear you crystal clear. Hey, what is distinguished professor? I mean, I know what the words mean, but how do you earn that title?
Well, it's interesting. I've been the first Black distinguished professor at the University of Alberta. This says something about the nature of the institution, because I think there were several other Black individuals who would be considered distinguished, but never got that title. But it's a title, it's an honorary title that's given to individuals who've done well in research and teaching and service to the community and to the world. And this sort of acknowledges that that you've reached that standard. Like you mentioned the fact that you could be an instructor, and you can be assistant professor, and then an associate professor, and going up the line to full professor, and then from full professor to a distinguished professor. Not everybody get that particular title, but that's one that was given to me. So I'm very grateful, and I think it's just it speaks about my work and the way in which people see my work. internationally and so on.
Well, and
Not
this
just
is
in Alberta.
this is my not so subtle way of definitively establishing your credibility, Dr. Knight, in this subject matter area. And we're grateful to have you joining us here in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. For audience members that have not familiarized themselves with this story recently, within the last couple of weeks, the RCMP arresting 4 men in Quebec in a major terrorism investigation, among them 2 active members of the Canadian Armed Forces, plus a former military member, plus a civilian instructor with the Air Cadets. These men charged with a number of offenses under Canada's Anti-Terrorism Act for, quote, facilitating terrorist activity, allegedly training in military-style tactics, shooting, ambush drills, scouting missions, and plotting, police say, to establish an anti-government militia to forcibly take over land north of Quebec City. Obviously, this raises eyebrows, and you were the first person that we thought of. When you first heard about this story, surprised or not?
Not surprised at all, because as you remember, I told you that we did a report for the Department of National Defense, which was funded by the Department of National Defense, to look into the possibility of extremist ideologies that was seeping into the military. And that's very concerning for the military. It's very concerning for DND, Department of National Defense. It should be very concerning for every single Canadian, because the military is there to protect us, to serve us, to serve Canadians, to protect us from harm from external forces primarily, but also internal terrorist organizations as well. So when you see that 2 of these individuals were active members of the Canadian Armed Forces, and the other 2 had some relationship with the Canadian Armed Forces, that should make people sit up and take notice, because this is very, very concerning for all Canadians. But I was not surprised, because my report to DND was very clear. It gave a warning that this sort of thing was happening within the military, and that the government needs to do something right away to bring an end to that kind of violent extremism. As the RCMP called it, it was ideologically motivated violent extremism. And that needs to be nipped in the bud before it gets any worse, because you mentioned earlier, a few bad apples may not spoil the entire bunch, but it has the potential of spoiling the entire bunch. So that's one of the concerns that we have.
I want to acknowledge right out of the gates, real talk, this is what's really on my mind, is that there are thousands of men and women who are currently serving or who have served that may perceive even a conversation like this, or some of the comments that they're about to read in the live chat, as an attack on the entire institution, as an attack on them and their service to their country. It feels a little bit awkward, doesn't it?
It does. But, we have to be very clear that this is not about the military as an institution per se. The majority of people, as you mentioned, in the military serve Canada very well. Many of them are on peacekeeping missions across the globe. They're doing some excellent work on behalf of Canadians. So we have to recognize that. And I think my report, what it did say was that this problem was not as deep as we thought it would be, and it's not as widespread as we thought it would be. But it certainly is there, and we need to take steps to stop it, whether it's in terms of recruitment of individuals coming into the military, to make sure that we can screen out those individuals that have those kinds of ideologically motivated hate within them, or whether it's a case of the institution itself having certain elements that lends itself or creates a situation where this kind of thing can thrive. I think we need to sort of look at both ends of the spectrum, and that's all the report was saying. Really, is not to diss the military, the great men and women who are in the military, but it is to say that there is a problem within the military. Part of that problem is a lack of diversity in the military. As you know, 90% of the Canadian military is white male. That says something about the nature of the institution itself. And maybe we need to change that by bringing in more individuals of diverse characters, not just in terms of skin color, but in terms of diverse ideologies, diverse ways of thinking. We need to sort of maybe expand the military in that way. And we need to have an expansion of our military given the threats that are coming from the South, from the United States in particular.
Yeah, no kidding. We'll touch on that in a second. Dr. Andy Knight, our guest, in our live chat powered by Park Power. Les says he used to drive for a moving van line. Says they moved a lot of DND, National Defense, RCMP. He says, I can honestly say there are more extremists than people would want to know in all of our national forces. Gizmo says military's had leadership issues for decades. It's good to know some of these issues are finally making their way in front of the public. Interesting comment here as well. Goes on to say, I'm really interested in the topic today. The issue in Quebec, not the first example. It says we had the Proud Boys, for example, infiltrate the Navy a few years ago. Do you think the average Canadian would be surprised if they were to read your report start to finish?
I think it would be, because they're not paying attention. They're not paying attention to what's going on in these kind of circles within the military. In Quebec, it's very interesting. There are what are called neo-pagan iconographies, tattoos and so on that individuals wear, which is a symbol of their white supremacy ideas in the military in Quebec. That's something that we don't hear a lot about, but there's been a lot of reports about this. The fact that many of these individuals believe in the sort of the virile European white male masculinity is very big among these individuals. They even go back as far as the Vikings and have that kind of Nordic religious symbolism, a motif within them. And this is something that that resonates, I think, with a lot of what are called white Christian nationalist ideologies that have crept into the military. So we have to pay attention to these things. Not to say that this is widespread at all, but it's the very fact that it's present and that these individuals were identified as being part of the military, Canadian military, needs to be concerning for all of us.
Andy, how can you take us into the process of a report like this? I mean, you sound the alarm here and you say this is a real issue, but then you're also telling us early in this interview that maybe the problem, and correct me if I'm misrepresenting your comment, but maybe the problem was not as pervasive as you thought. How do you do this? You're obviously not interviewing every soldier.
Not every soldier, but we try to be as careful in terms of getting a broad cross section of individuals to be interviewed. So we interviewed literally over 1,000 people. So some of them are active members of the force or the different forces, the different parts of the Canadian military. Others used to be members of the Canadian military. Some of them were forced out of the military because of certain behaviors and so on. Others were just simply discriminated against and therefore left the military because of the sense of discrimination that they felt by leaders and superiors within the military. So there are a number of reasons why this sort of thing is troubling and concerning. So I think the report tried its best to be as fair and as balanced as possible. We know that this is not a problem that the Canadian government was concerned about in the past, but is now become very concerned about because of what's going on in the United States. Trump, what's going on in France, Marie Le Pen in France, the kind of ideologies that are coming out of Scandinavian countries and so on, which is sort of being fed into and seeping into the Canadian culture. And that's very, very concerning. And of course, the other part of this is that you're dealing with individuals who are white, obviously, and who think that the Canadian culture is being somehow defiled by diversity. So they have this anti-diversity part of this. And then they think that the government is associated with things like multiculturalism. So therefore they have an anti-government position as well. So you have that combination of things. And it all becomes very concerning because this can lead people astray. And those people who are not thoughtful enough and not thinking through what's happening may get caught up in this kind of what I would consider to be a very cultish approach to the culture. And that needs to change.
I'm just punching the link to your report, Andy, into our live chat. We'll put it in the show notes as well. For those that are going to be listening later on YouTube or watching this, I'm linking to the University of Alberta website that highlights your work, and it points out that you've discovered that recruits, in many cases, that are seeking training, that are seeking resources, were never doing so for the so-called right reasons in the first place. In other words, they've been looking to ready themselves for what they perceive to be a looming race war. That's obviously going to sound the alarm.
Yeah, that training for the race war is very, very, very important, because what's happening is that some people, like you say, enter the military not for good reasons, and sometimes nefarious reasons. You have some individuals actually said to us directly when we were interviewing individuals, that they joined the military to learn the skills that the military has to offer. Skills like killing people.
Jeez.
I mean, that's a skill that all militaries have. And one individual even said that he wanted to learn how to kill brown and black people. Now, that was very, very concerning. I didn't include those words in the report because I thought it was too explosive. But I did have it there in my back pocket to remind people that this is what's happening. And when I spoke to leaders in DND and to some of the Canadian Armed Force leadership, they said they know that there are some people that come into the military with those kind of nefarious intents. They want to learn how to maneuver, how to, the military is very, very good at camaraderie, creating a sense of, fellowship and camaraderie, which is something that most individuals who are leaning towards violent extremism want to replicate in their organizations. So, they want to see, they want to be able to know the tactical skills that you learn from the military. They want to learn how to utilize weapons, obviously, and the kinds of ammunition that you need to utilize in any sort of race war. So if they're planning for a race war, the military is a perfect place to learn those skills and then apply those skills in your actual attempt to take over, as in this case of Quebec, to take over part of Quebec and to create a civilization, as they're concerned about, that's non-defiled by diversity, that's non-defiled by people of different colors and different religions and so on, and that very focused on what I call white Christendom, or in some cases, a Viking culture,
right,
of masculinity is very, very, very important for them.
My guess is that you're not plotting something like this, especially with military and strategic training, with the assumption you can do it with 4 people. My guess is there are more people implicated here. What do we know about that, if anything? The RCMP, obviously, once charges are laid, it's handed over to Crown prosecutors, typically tight-lipped. They're not going to comment on anything, especially with active investigations. But what do you know, or what do you suspect?
Well, we know, for example, that these individuals had Facebook accounts, that had Instagram accounts, that they were involved in what's called the dark web. So they have a way of trying to reach out to other people who may be of like mind, also violent extremists, and try to enroll them in this organization that they're creating. This is not necessarily being enrolled in the military, but enrolled in this organization that would be used for the so-called race war. So there's all this stuff going on. So we know that they're using the online features in order to be able to spread their hate. I know that the RCMP was able to discover that there were these websites, even some pretty open and public things like Instagram was utilized to try to recruit more members into their group. So this is something that we need to be paying attention to.
We're talking to Dr. Andy Knight in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. I see Calgary mayoral candidate Jeremy Farkas in our live chat today says it's really not that complicated. Just like with the police accountability debate, we can at the same time be for the good cops and against the bad cops. To which Jillian replies, I agree 100%. She says, but some folks struggle with that. Like, you kind of have to be all in or all out with supporting the police. Jillian says, not to be petty, but when Dr. Knight was last on Real Talk, some folks were basically like, not all military, you know? She says, kudos to those in the military willing to be vigilant and not look away from the problem. Jillian also shares, Andy, this is interesting, says the only reason that she didn't sign up for the Canadian Forces was the sex assault scandals and attitudes in the military at the time. She says, I remember one woman on TV saying that it was a woman's fault, for example, and that women don't belong in active duty. She says that was back in the 90s. There was also a report, your report's not the first, back in 2022, another report, right? Basically was saying a lot of the same things. How do we assess the military's response? Like we've talked a lot and we've understood, because they've stated it plainly, that there's a real recruiting challenge. But how would you describe the learning and the evolution and the growth in a positive direction of the Canadian Forces, if at all, over the past few years?
Well, you know, you're right. There have been other reports, and I've built on those reports myself. Louis Abor, who was a former major prosecutor for the International Tribunal on former Yugoslavia, she wrote a brilliant report that talked about the way in which some military members are educated, and even called for the scrapping of the military colleges, for example, saying that maybe what needs to be done is that these individuals need to get training in regular universities or colleges so that they can interact with people who are civilians. The military needs to have that kind of civilian input, and vice versa. We can learn a lot about the military members if they were in classes with us, for example, at the university. So I think that these reports are very important, and I think we've built on those reports, but focus particularly on this notion of white supremacy and xeno-racism, which has been the major challenge for today. So it's really an update on many of these reports. But one of the things I can tell you, and this is based on what actually happened a couple of months ago when I presented the report to the Department of National Defense headquarters in Ottawa. There were military officials there and members of the Department of National Defense who were taking specific notes about which recommendations that they made that could be low-hanging fruits, which recommendations are sort of in the middle category. They're not low-hanging fruits, but could be worked on, and which category recommendations are already being worked on by the military. So we know that things are being done by the military establishment to try to bring an end to some of these problems. It's just that, is it being done fast enough? Is there urgency attached to it? I think that's what our report tried to point out, that we need a little bit more urgency in making the reforms that are necessary, whether it be at the recruitment stage or whether it be within the institution itself. Like most institutions that we have in Canada have an element of white supremacy attached to them, because they were created at the time when the country was predominantly white. Now we have a country that's very diverse. We shouldn't be drawing all of our recruits from rural areas, which seems to be the majority of the cases. We should be looking at some of the urban centers where there are, in fact, diverse individuals that could be brought into the military. That can change the dynamics of the military from a traditional British or French Francophone military to a truly Canadian military that's truly beneficial for all people.
Yeah, this feels like a chicken and egg or a horse and cart type scenario, because you say, well, you need more diversity in the Canadian Forces to address extremism or white supremacy, and then you look at, some marginalized or so-called minority communities, and they're going to go, well, why the fuck would I sign up for that? Quite frankly, I'm not interested. Do you know what I mean? It's probably easier said than done. Pardon my French, by the way.
You're absolutely right. It's probably easier said than done. In fact, it is easier said than done, because I know for a fact that there are certain people, for example, in the Somali community, who will not want to be part of the military because they had a very bad experience in Somalia. They came out of a country where anyone in uniform was suspect as far as they're concerned. So they don't like, they're kind of anti-police, anti-RCMP, or anti-military, and they will have a very difficult time being convinced to be part of the Canadian military. However, you have others in minority communities who are very loyal to the military because they came from cultures that weren't very loyal. In India, for example, or Pakistan, there's a kind of a loyalty to the military that when individuals come to Canada, they bring that loyalty with them to the Canadian military as well. So you see there's that kind of mixture of situations. So we can't just, it's not just a black and white situation. There's a lot of gray here. And I think the main point I'm trying to make is that we can no longer depend on a military that's 90% white male.
Dr. Knight, we've got Robin is watching us streaming the show live on X this morning and says, listen to the division. Says white Christians have been mentioned by this so-called expert many times. Says, are white Christians the only ones that are susceptible to extreme thoughts? And then Vamp Fashions goes on to say, well, they're merely the only religiously affiliated people you can say bad things about, but they're likely the least extremist. Just for the benefit of everyone's full understanding, we're not talking about the entire Christian community that happens to be white. Can we talk about what you're alluding to?
We're talking about violent extremists, and not all Christians are violent extremists. In fact, most Christians are peaceful, loving individuals that want to follow Christ, as an example. So that's not trying to diss all white Christians. But there is a problem with white Christian nationalism, which is a kind of a form of extremism that is equivalent, I would say, to the Taliban, equivalent to groups that are Muslims that might have that very extremist position as well, but with their religion in mind. So this is not to say that all religions are bad or all white Christian religions are bad. There are obviously pockets of this that we need to be concerned about, and I don't think that's a dissing of all Christians at all.
We've got others commenting. Don's watching. It sounds like Don, kind of knows what he's talking about, has some sort of experience. He says there's nobody left in rural Canada to recruit from. He says that source dried up in the 1980s. Don says, I'm sitting with our Navy recruiters, and our source of recruits are urban and suburban youth. What is the future of the military, as far as you can tell in this context? Like 5 years from now, let's say 3-5 years from now, what represents meaningful progress from somebody who's done the amount of interviews and the amount of research and has the understanding of this issue like you do?
Well, again, it is embracing diversity, embracing the fact that Canada is truly a multicultural country. Even if some people don't like to think of it about the country as a multicultural country, it is, in fact, in reality, a multicultural country. So you need to be able to draw, if you want to expand the military, which I think we want to do, you need to bring people in who are from different cultures, who are from different religions, who are from different genders, who are from different sexual orientations. We need to bring in people of diverse characters into the military. And maybe the decision-making that's being done at the top of the military would have much greater effect when you have a much more diverse set of people around the table making decisions. I think that goes not just for the military, but also for universities or for the police force or for the RCMP. The more diversity you have in a country that is diverse, probably the better you're able to deal with individuals, say, in Somalia or in the Congo or in Haiti. If you send up people from the Canadian military on the UN peacekeeping mission, they can actually operate better if they understand the language, if they understand the culture of the people that they are trying to help. So I think that's only, I think it's a common sense way of approaching the challenge that we have as a country that's become very multicultural, very diverse.
Andy, in closing, I apologize. I can't reference the specific audience member that made the comment because the live chat is humming right now. I'd have to scroll back. But somebody made a comment along the lines of, and I don't, not in the spirit of sort of like endorsing this type of perspective or permitting this type of perspective, but basically saying, yeah, you need a few members that are a little squirrely. The rank and file kind of keeps them in line until you need them to act out, so to speak. And I think everybody knows what they're alluding to. And folks are making a lot of comments about what draws people into careers in law enforcement, in military. It draws a certain type of personality. I'm taking a look, for example, right now at the Edmonton Police Service website, joineps.ca. This is their recruiting arm on their website. Look at this, protect with purpose, it says. It says they're looking for compassionate, community-minded leaders who reflect the diverse communities of Edmonton and the values of EPS. No offense to the guy pictured. It's kind of funny they put a white guy on the website. But I digress. I might have done something differently there. But I've also seen, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but also a billboard campaign, also the Edmonton Police, and it says something along the lines of it's not just force or more than force or something along those lines, right? They're talking about the types of officers and the skill sets that they bring. I'd be interested in your comments on that.
Yeah, I think, diversity is a very interesting thing because obviously it's messy when you have a much more diverse community than if you have a sort of a monolithic community. It's very much more messy, right, with a diverse community. But sometimes it's richer in terms of the ideas that come out of that multicultural nature of the community. I see this all the time at the university now that we're becoming a little bit more aggressive in terms of equity and diversity and inclusion, including more people from different cultures into the university. You're getting better decisions, I think, being made around the table when there are people from different parts of the world making those decisions, not just a certain type of Canadian making those decisions. So I think we need to be able to step back a little bit and see the positive nature of having a diverse military. I think that's the first step. The second step is that we know it's not going to be easy because how do you deal, for example, with individuals who may want to have their religion respected in the military? And this is a very serious case. We looked at this in our report as well. We had some Muslims, for example, that weren't very happy with the fact that most of the chaplains were Christian. So, how are they going to be able to pursue their religion within the military? They weren't allowed to take off certain days for Ramadan or to pray or to fast or whatever because of the structure of the military and the focus on training and doing the job of the military. So we know that those problems do exist, but we have to find a way to compromise, to find a way to allow diversity to bring the best out of people rather than the worst out of people. I think that's what the report really is hitting at more than anything else.
Andy, just a quick question from an audience member wondering if they can access the full report. My understanding is it's 50 pages or so. Is that available for public consumption?
Well, I would say the penultimate version is available. If people write to me, I can send the penultimate version.
Are you okay with me passing along the one that you sent me about a week ago?
Yes, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
But remember that it's a sort of evolving report in the sense that we work with the military, we work with DND, Department of National Defense. We had a briefing in Ottawa. We're taking from the briefing information that will help to expand the report a bit. To sort of deal with some of the statistical errors, maybe if you might call it that needs to be corrected. The acknowledgement of people who wants to be acknowledged and taking names out of people that don't want to have their names mentioned, because this is a very sensitive talk for some people. So I think we just need to sort of polish it a little bit, but I believe that it will come out as an independent report to be published by the University of Alberta Press. So that's the one that at the end of the day will be circulated much more widely when we're finished.
Dr. Knight, we always appreciate your availability, your expertise. Thanks for making time for us. We appreciate it.
Ryan, it's always been a pleasure to be on your show. So thanks very much for having me.
All right, my friend. We'll talk again soon. That's distinguished Professor Dr. Andy Knight in our Real Talk feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, the best or nothing. I see some comments here. Matthew recognizing a recent PR campaign or a recruitment campaign on behalf of the Canadian Forces. Matthew remembers a series of ads with the slogan, Johnny, fight fear, fight distress, fight chaos, which is kind of a cool one. Mm-hmm. Others are saying, Emily says, I think, police forces, law enforcement could do better psychological evaluations than they do. Interesting comment from Emily. I have no insight into that. I've never participated in the process. Although, did I ever tell you that for one summer in university, I worked for the Calgary Police Service for one summer.
What were you doing?
It was called VAP. It was the Vandalism Awareness Patrol.
Oh, okay.
And, what do you mean? Oh, okay. You're disappointed I wasn't on the front lines.
I was just going to say front lines. Yeah.
Well, it was kind of cool, though, because I think this was probably like casual recruitment on their part. But they gave us not police uniforms, but these red T-shirts with the police logo on the front, VAP on the back. And it was like a mountain bike patrol. Obviously, we weren't armed. We were very minimally trained. And by that, I mean, like, not trained at all. But we had like a walkie-talkie, which always made us feel very special as 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
And we'd like just cruise through, have a presence. Like so much of policing, and I'm not an expert, obviously, but so much of policing is presence and visibility. And so they'd send us to, ride our bikes through back alleys and areas that had been targeted in past, businesses that were dealing with, ongoing graffiti and those sorts of things. But interesting insight into the workings of that, on the inside just for a summer. Gizmo says when they were in the Royal Canadian Air Force, thank you for your service, says I worked with a number of people, many different heritages, and learned a lot from them. Canadians who want to stand the line come in all shapes and colors, all religions, all backgrounds. That from Gizmo. As always, we're curious to know what you think about what you heard today. Talk at RyanJespersen.com, and I'll let you know, Real Talkers, as well, if you'd like to check out that full report with Dr. Knight's blessing. We'll make that easy for you, and we'll commit to forwarding that to you. If you send us an email, send me an email to talk at RyanJespersen.com in the subject line. Just simply write something along the lines of Canadian Forces Report, and we'll get that to you in the next 24 hours or so. These conversations happen with the support of Real Talk partners, sponsors, and I'm very happy to let you know about one that, we're thrilled to introduce to you. If you didn't already know, The Helm Clothing. I'm going to take you on a little tour here. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can check this out. This is an absolutely stunning downtown Edmonton location, a 3-story brick and mortar location, just a couple of blocks from our studio, in fact, a contemporary retail experience. This store independently owned and operated, focusing on custom suits and luxury casual wear. Now, I always tell you, I'm never going to send you somewhere that I don't believe in. I've been shopping at The Helm for years now. Every time we throw our Real Talk holiday mixer, this is where we welcome our sponsors and the VIPs. I go in and I see Chad and the team at The Helm, and I treat myself. I say I'm going to pick up a nice pair of jeans, like denim, a beautiful blazer, and a nice crisp dress shirt. And every single time they've delivered. If you're into some of these beautiful brands, as you can see, Ralph Lauren, Zegna, Brunello Cucinelli, and the like. If you're looking for bespoke, custom, luxury casual wear or custom suits, look no further than The Helm. I encourage you to visit them in store. There's nothing quite like that retail experience. Beautiful stuff, as you can see. And you can also check out their website, thehelmclothing.com. When you visit The Helm, you make sure you let them know that Real Talk sent you. You know how that goes. A shout out to our friends at Solar by Kubi, celebrating 10 years in 2025. Unbelievable. Canada's fastest growing solar company. If you're thinking about going green, if you're thinking about solar, it's never been more doable. Between the Canada Greener Homes Loan and programs like that Clean Energy Improvement Program, you don't have to shell out the full cost up front to get started. You can turn your roof or any extra space into something that actually saves you money long term, and the Kubi team is there to walk you through every single step. Obviously, the sun's not going anywhere, so why not make it work for you? You can cut those energy bills and make a move toward a cleaner, brighter future. You can head to kubi.ca, that's KUBY.ca, to get your free quote today from Solar by Kubi. Friesen Brothers celebrating 70 years. How's that? Still family owned and operated in 16 different Alberta locations, and they're thrilled to be introducing new Mile 12 cabin sausages. These are all made in-store by real butchers using real Alberta pork, real Alberta beef with absolutely no fillers, no artificial flavors, just simple, honest ingredients. Friesen Brothers even uses its own sourdough breadcrumbs, which gives these sausages a subtle home-style texture and taste. You can check out classic beef, beef and onion, traditional pork, mild Italian pork sausage. They're all made in small batches right in your local Freezin Brothers. They're not going to be shipped in from across the country, and they're all frozen for easy meals that make fresh made quality. You can check out the Mile 12 cabin sausages at your local Freezin Brothers. And our friends at California Closets of Canada reminding you that their design consultations are always free. You've got absolutely nothing to lose by signing up for a quick meeting at californiaclosets.ca, just like my wife and I did 8 years ago when they ended up transforming our family room, our primary bedroom, beautiful installations that are standing the test of time. No matter what space you're looking at improving, no matter what storage solution you'd like to explore, and quite frankly, no matter what your budget is, California Closets can work with it. All of their installations built right here in our home province of Alberta and guaranteed for life. You can request that free consultation today at californiaclosets.ca. Shout out to our YouTube Real VIP member, Reed Clark, yesterday. How fun was that? We've been talking to you about our YouTube channel memberships, obviously optional. This is just a fun way for you to further plug into the show and tap into some exclusive perks, including, some custom, some fun little, what do they call those? Doodads, those thumbnails. You get the custom stuff in the chat. Access to our Real Talk community. Thank you, badges. The Real Talk community chat, that's our Real Talk Discord, which is going off the week that we were gone. And then, of course, at the Real VIP level, some custom experiences. So we were able to grab lunch on the occasion of our 1,000th episode with
How good was that?
Connect with him a little bit more.
If you're a VIP member, you could have come for lunch.
Wouldn't that have been great?
With us and the rest of the team. It was here doing social media and photography.
Watson,
yesterday.
Our photographer.
And had some nice food, had some nice drinks.
Once our server
nice
found out it was your birthday,
oh God!
The next thing we knew, there were lemon drops on the table, which was
geez.
kind of a nice brunch style shot. If you're going to do Monday morning shots, I recommend the lemon drop.
It's like being handed a glass of it was like a swimming pool. I'm like, this is a cup full of alcohol.
It was too much.
We ordered a shot. This is a cup.
Yeah, it was too much. But an interesting day yesterday for us. Not just 1,000 episodes, not just Johnny's birthday, obviously, but also Michael Walters, former city councillor, entering the Edmonton mayoral race. And as you know, leading up to the October 20th election, municipal elections across our home province, we'll be checking in with the serious mayoral candidates in the biggest cities and following some of the other stories as well. Why don't we load up that Michael Walters clip, the highlight for anybody that may have missed it. And then I want to show you the early results of an unofficial, unscientific Twitter poll that we're currently rolling out on my personal Twitter account, on my personal X. But we asked Michael Walters, essentially, what sets him apart. He enters the race late. He's beginning his fundraising late. He's putting together a team as other front runners or top contenders have already put their teams together. More on that in a minute. Rumblings of maybe some dissension in the ranks, rumblings of some problems in some of these campaigns. But Michael Walters telling us in an exclusive in the Real Talk studio here in Edmonton's historic Mercer Warehouse that he's not worried about it. He's convinced Edmontonians will see him as the best option.
I can work with environmentalists, businesses, large corporations, not-for-profits. I have these relationships and ability to weave their interests together. And what I've heard in this campaign, which is part of my compulsion to come back, is a continuation of divisiveness, referring to business owners as greedy, talking about environmentalists as naive, right? Like everybody has their interests and their concerns. And I think a mayor's job is to respect those, honor those, weave those together into a common ground agenda and make decisions on behalf of the city.
What's your promise on property taxes?
Yeah, promise and a plan. So you're right. Whether you're a newcomer who's just moved here, who wants to live in a city that provides good services, safety, opportunity, whether you're a longtime business owner who's sort of feeling like you're getting buried under them, or you're a senior who still wants your grandkids to have a cool city to live in, but you're on a fixed term, you can't afford it, or just a regular family struggling with affordability issues. This myth that in order to maintain or improve services, taxes have to go up needs to be dealt with seriously. Whether you've been here for over 100 years or just over 100 days, people come here from around the world because they want to build a life, they want a better future for their kids, They want a place that's interesting, that gives them joy, gives them opportunity. I'm ready to lead our city. I'm passionate about leading our city. There's a vision for Edmonton that matters, which is that we can build a city where people and businesses thrive, and we can build a city that is as beautiful and as enduring as the Northern Lights above us. This is what I want to do, and this is the conversation I want to have with Edmontonians in the next 3 months.
So it's Michael Walters.
What a line there.
When he brought up the Northern Lights, I was like, whoa.
I felt the violins in the background. I saw waving Alberta, Edmonton City flag. I was standing at attention. Yes. And the Northern Lights will shine on our city.
I feel like, and I was kind of wondering, I remember I kind of joked with him if he, if this was like, if he's teeing up if he was teeing up like a new billboard campaign or a new slogan, and that Northern Lights thing obviously sort of, set the tone. If you look at it, I mean, the Real Talk color, what do we call it? Our gradient, our color gradient.
Yeah, palette.
A little reminiscent of the Northern Lights. But what I couldn't help but notice is that the Walters campaign, you check it out at michaelwalters.ca, they're actually going for their campaign color. They're going with Nenshi purple. And I don't know if this is actually, you can just check it out here on my screen. I don't know if that's like, I doubt it's a nod to the former Calgary mayor. But I remember Nenshi telling reporters, kind of divulging back in the day, and I know he said it on this show many interviews ago, that the reason that his campaign initially chose purple when he was running for mayor of Calgary that first time was that he said it was a blend of blue and red, right? Like it was like it was kind of this subtle nod to the idea that whether you're a conservative or a liberal in a federal sense, no matter how you lean politically, that you may find or could find a political home supporting Nenshi. And I wonder, I mean, campaign branding is very intentional, right? It's not kind of willy-nilly. They're not just like, what's your favorite color and go with it. And I thought that purple was an interesting choice for the Walters campaign.
I like it. I think, what do I think of? I think of lavender, even though I don't like lavender.
Is lavender it's just a little too much? Like it's just a little
something about it. Like it reminds me of soap or something.
Yeah.
I don't know I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But the partner's really big on lavender, and I'm always like, smells like.
Well, she probably loves that. She knows that you're not going to touch it.
Reminds me of when you were a kid. I know it doesn't happen anymore, and you might have got your mouth washed out with soap for saying a bad word.
Yes.
That's what it reminds me of.
So you have it lavender up PTSD from lavender soap mouthwashes. Justin in the chat, powered by Park Power, says, I liked most of what Michael Walters said yesterday, and I recognize him from his time on council. And he says, indeed, the Northern Lights line resonated with Justin, which is kind of interesting. So you've got a real race.
I feel like, and I was talking to some people yesterday about the interview, I feel like this is a hard campaign, right? Because we don't have a lot of money. So, when Iveson was like, LRT, here, like that money's not there anymore, right?
Well, I don't know if that was ever there, but they were relying on the federal government.
You know what I mean, though? Yeah. Now we're strapped more than ever. So, like, it seems like each candidate kind of is saying the same things. Affordability, safety, they all kind of have the same lines. So I really think, and this is just my opinion, but I'm sure some other people have noticed it, that it's really like personality and the way you come off, your vibe is really gonna. I mean, you can't say that Walters isn't gonna eat a little bit of everyone's lunch.
Oh, for sure.
He's gonna take numbers from literally every other candidate who is in the running for this. He's going to take, some from NAC. He's going to take some from Jaffer. He's going to take some from Cartmel. And I really think it comes down to, like, are you smooth? Are you polished? Are you articulate? And do you have a vibe? And I felt like yesterday Walters had that. Do I think he's going to win from one interview? No. But, I mean, you can't be on the other side of the fence right now on another team and not be a little bit worried.
Yeah, I was that whole vote splitting idea, and we saw that. I'm trying to track down a text here, but we heard that kind of as a recurring theme, like he's going to split the votes, and actually I put that in front of Walters by way of a text message, and he just thought, he's he doesn't buy into that idea. Just made a private comment, which I will now make public. But he said that the idea of like that he's going to cause the vote split. He says that's as though these other candidates have already earned the votes they need.
That's true.
And I think that what he's alluding to is correct, which is that there's still a lot of time here. I mean, this election will be here before we know it. Here's the 2 dates. If you're not a political nerd and geek like we are, August 18th is a big one. That's the Battle River Crowfoot by-election. More on that in just a second, by the way. The number of candidates is absurd. And October 20th is the other. So August 18th by-election and October 20th, our home province of Alberta will hold its municipal elections.
Which is funny because, like, we know that these municipal elections, like, what is it, like 30% of people vote? Like, so.
Well, hopefully you always hope for like 60, which is kind of pathetic, but 60% voter turnout's decent.
Yeah. So I liked how you brought up, what is it? GTO, get out the vote?
Yeah.
Get GTO. Yeah. Because that could be something that propels someone in the lead in this, because I do think it is now that Walters is in there. Him, Nat, Cartmel, maybe Jaffer in there. Like, it's going to be kind of close. So, like, yeah, getting out the vote, because we just know that people don't really vote the same way in municipal elections as they do on the federal level.
You're 100% right. And if you don't see, like, dramatic differences between the candidates that you're considering, it could come down to the minutia.
That's what I mean.
It could come down to the X factor. Like, I'm not even trying to be an asshole here, but, like, Michael Walters has the best hair.
Dude,
he's taller. He's taller
the
than
same
the rest.
platform. I feel like they're all saying the same thing.
They're not very different.
Affordability, safety.
You reference Raheem Jaffer. Like, I've had some insights into some internal polling on some of the campaigns. I will say this. Like, Raheem Jaffer is not as far behind as some people might assume. Yeah. This guy was a longtime federal politician, obviously. He's got decent name recognition. Some of his name recognition is unfortunate. And if you Google him, it's obviously based on some personal stuff. That's something that he'll obviously have to fight against. But still, a lot of people are going to go, oh, yeah, Raheem Jaffer. Like somebody right now, Emily says, she goes, I remember Michael Walters says he was back when he was like community league president. She says, like, way back in the day. He's putting his time there. And she says, like, she sees some of the character qualities. He was just as nice and focused back then. Name recognition is huge. Now,
of course.
The two real advantages, I think that Walters is but 4 years removed from council service. He's obviously still in the mix on the name recognition file. You've got Andrew Knack and obviously Tim Cartmel, who are, currently serving councillors. Will that serve them well or not? I don't know. They could be, in public perception, tied to a council that is perceived by many to have been unproductive and dysfunctional. Andrew Knack taking a more positive interpretation of that, and Cartmel basically calling out his council colleagues and also getting burned by his council colleagues, right? When he was on vacation and missed a pretty key vote, which I think is hurting him right now. And then you got Tony Katarina, who you'd think, has some name recognition as well. I got no beef with Tony at all. Tony's a super nice guy. But Tony, he's kind of from that Mandel era of council. And for whatever reason, and I think probably he could respectfully beef up his campaign team, and probably he's talked about Tony's taking a stand. I've seen some of his stuff on Facebook and the like. Maybe you've seen it too, Real Talkers, but he's like, we're not doing campaign signs. So he's saying people are tying a white ribbon around their doorknobs to support him. Interesting approach. I'm not sure that is that for Alzheimer's? Is that for like the kids? Like, what's the white ribbon? I'm not really sure. I don't think that, if I was advising the campaign, I wouldn't take that approach. But you know what? If lawn signs are $4 or $6 a piece or whatever they are, maybe that's part of it, right? But so you've got Tony Katarina kind of running this like bootstrapped kind of grassroots campaign. And I think the polls, at least the ones that I've seen with the agreement to not release the specific numbers, it's not resonating with people.
No.
So name recognition will only take you so far in something like this.
You got to rattle the cage. You got to make a little noise. And I do realize we're only talking about 3 or 4 names, the majority of the time so far on the show.
There's Dr. Omar Mohammed.
I was just going to say, Omar Mohammed, like a smart guy. Like
pediatric dental surgeon.
I'm looking at the website right now. There's other names in the running for mayor citywide on the website. We understand that.
Are you looking at the official candidates list right now?
Yeah.
There was a question
you
here.
got Tugwell, Mohammed, Denman, Sandman. There's a lot
Is
of names.
Andrew Knack on the list yet?
Andrew Knack is not on the list
Weird.
right now. But I don't see Walters on the list right now officially either.
Well, maybe
so I think there's a deadline, like it's September or something. You have to officially.
I think it's coming up soon.
Or somebody said that in the chat yesterday. Anyways, what I'm saying is you got to get out there and make noise. And maybe like this infill thing with Cartmel and Knack, that worked for them. Because whether you agreed with either one of them, at least their names were out there. At least you're seeing them on social media. You're seeing them in the media. You're seeing them having a debate about something, right? So, I mean, if these other names want to get in there and have name recognition, they need to make a little noise, and we haven't really heard anything yet, right?
The campaign period running from October 31st of last year to December 31st of this year. Nomination period running from January 2nd to September 22nd.
Yeah, there you go. So they don't officially have to be on until the last week of September.
So I guess you can fundraise. You can. I don't even know the inner workings of how it works. Don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm talking about. What I do know is that we have an unofficial, unscientific Twitter poll. Don't read into it any more than a casual note, but it's active as we're live streaming this episode. You've still got about 10 hours to vote if you like on my personal profile on Twitter, on X, at Ryan Jespersen. I've asked, where's your vote going as of today, Edmonton? Obviously, some people voting in this are not from Edmonton. Obviously, some people, obviously don't take this as God speaks, set in stone. But interesting, with 514 votes, 10 hours left to go, half of respondents, 50%, say that if the election was held today, they would vote for Andrew Knack. 21% say they would vote for Tim Cartmel. 18% say they would vote for Michael Walters. And 10% say they would vote for somebody else, which could be Jaffer, Katarina, Mohammed, and other candidates. Some of the comments have been interesting as well. Michael W., hardcore real talker. What's up, Michael? Says probably Andrew Knack yesterday, but Michael Walters today after he heard him on Real Talk. Edmonton Hockey Night. When is this election? Lori says it's too bad Tim Cartmel blew up his own campaign by not voting on infill housing. Says I like him, but this is very concerning. Alberta Politics says David Staples is supporting Michael Walters for mayor. I'm not sure if that's true. I haven't verified that, but interesting. Oilers Couch GM says Walters, please. Pierre says not sure, undecided. Emily acknowledges not from Edmonton, but if I could vote, it would be Michael 100%. Steve says, as far as I know, Andrew Knack, the only one on the list who continues to operate as a non-affiliated councillor, has not joined any of the formal municipal parties. We will note that Michael Walters is also running as an independent. Marcel says in true Tim Cartmel fashion, I've decided, Jespo, to skip your vote to go on vacation. And WRW says Edmonton needs change and Andrew Knack won't provide anything different. So there you go. There's an example of someone who's going to tie an incumbent or tie a current councillor to their perception of the performance of the current council. So there you go. Obviously, this is not the vote, but this is just shedding some interesting light. We're also paying attention to this story. I mean, this is a national news story. Of course, focusing, like we said, on this August 18th by-election in our home province, and in the beautiful riding of Battle River Crowfoot, home to about 108,000 people, about 80,000-ish voters. It doesn't mean all 80,000 will turn out to a by-election. Typically, by-elections draw fewer people. But everybody pays attention to by-elections because they can serve as a litmus test of where the public is landing on the performance of the current government, but more so in this case. And this is a very interesting and high-profile by-election for obvious reasons, and that is that the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, he's not the leader of the official opposition until he wins a seat in the House of Commons, but Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre running to get his seat, an Alberta seat after losing his Ontario riding, obviously in the recent federal election. What's particularly interesting about this is that there are now more than 100 candidates running. This is so stupid. Running against Pierre Poilievre in this by-election. That's the most in Canadian history. And Johnny, not only will this break the record for the most candidates on a federal ballot in Canadian history, 108 candidates as of the most recent update. But this group, the Longest Ballot Committee, you remember their shenanigans?
Course, yeah.
You know, their shenanigans were at play in the federal election, again, targeting Pierre Poilievre's riding. And I'm not saying, as a matter of fact, I'll tell you what I am saying. I am saying that the Longest Ballot Committee is not the reason that Pierre Poilievre lost the election. Can we all agree on that? But they're saying, this group, wants to put a citizens' assembly in charge of electoral reform, right? They say political parties are too reluctant to make the government more representative of the electorate. Canadians have been wanting this. Canadians have been demanding this subtly, like Canadians do. Canadians have been gently demanding electoral reform for a long time. And the former Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, promised it 10 years ago and never delivered on it. I remember we asked Jim Carr about that. At the time, was a Liberal minister. He was on Real Talk. I think it was about 3 years ago. We asked him about that. It was a remarkable interview, and he basically said, yeah, we broke that promise. I couldn't believe he said it. You don't typically get that kind of candor from politicians. But this group, the Longest Ballot Committee, says that they're trying to get 200 names on the ballot ahead of this by-election. And I know a lot of people, in particular, ardent conservative supporters, are calling this out, saying it's bullshit, saying that they're targeting Pierre Poilievre. This is not what democracy is all about. And we've received some letters and some feedback to the show saying exactly that. But I'm not convinced that this just hurts Pierre Poilievre. Right?
Sure.
Now, the idea here is to delay the vote, to make it more onerous, to make it, quite frankly, more difficult for the average person that's used to going into that cardboard trifold and they see the 8 names or they see the 7 names on there. They're going to see 108 at minimum and maybe 200 names. It makes the ballot counting take longer. They're trying to get the attention of the rest of the country to force meaningful electoral reform, and they want to circumvent politicians in that decision.
Sure, I think that last point was the main one, though. I think it's a show of, opposition, and mainly. And like I mean, I know I'm laughing in the background while you're saying this, but yeah, it is tomfoolery. It does slow things down. It is kind of ridiculous, but at the same time, what do you want to lock it down and say only 5 or 6 or, we can't shut doors on people for running. But what I will say is that, like, and somebody just commented this in the chat, like, if you can't just scroll down alphabetically, like, is it really that hard? If there's 100 names or 1,000, I still know to go down to P for Poilievre and find him on the box.
I knew you were a Poilievre supporter.
But I'm just saying, like it doesn't seem that hard to me to search through 100 names alphabetically and find the one you want. I think what this mostly is, it's a showing of opposition. It's taking a stand, which I am always for. So, but I do realize it's not funny, and I do realize it makes things harder for ballot counters and people involved in the elections process, and it is a bit of tomfoolery.
Yeah, some fair points in the chat. Like Mike, I see you. Mike says, really, Jespo, like Canadians are demanding electoral reform? Is it really a majority? He says, I've always felt when push comes to shove, Canadians are kind of meh when it comes to electoral reform. Mike, it's a totally fair comment. And I bet you that if you stop the average Canadian on the street, not to insult my fellow Canadians, but if you said, do you require, are you looking for, or would you like to see electoral reform? Some may say yes. And if you said, what would you like to see change? Then I bet perhaps fewer of them would be able to articulate a specific answer. Fair? Marie says proportional representation is absolutely needed. Kathy says, I understand the point that this Longest Ballot Committee is trying to make, but I feel bad for legitimate independent candidates like Bonnie Critchley.
Sure.
Bonnie, who's now been the subject or the star of one of our most watched interviews in Real Talk history, wrote a letter, an open letter to the committee, to the Longest Ballot Committee on her campaign website. And she says that there's a backlash in the riding from voters who are worried that she's a, quote, fake out candidate. Bonnie says, I don't have a massive team. I don't have backing from millions of people. I have to go door to door within my community and explain to my neighbors that I have nothing to do with you, with the Longest Ballot Committee, right? Michael Harris is running for the Libertarian Party in that riding. He says that this protest is making a mockery of the democratic process. Says, quote, this flood of joke candidates doesn't just waste voters' time. It actively hurts serious independent and third-party candidates who are working hard to give this riding real alternatives. And quite frankly, I think that independent candidates or candidates like, Critchley or Michael Harris, I think have more of a point than Pierre Poilievre does. Like, I know I saw you, Emily, yesterday in the chat. I apologize I didn't respond to it at the time, but I saw Emily in all caps. I said it's very likely that Pierre Poilievre's going to win this thing by a long shot. And Emily in all caps said, stop saying that. And I recognize the point that you're making. I would also say that I really don't think that this talk show will influence an election like that to a certain degree. I'm calling a spade, right? Damien Couric, the MP, the backbench MP who stepped aside, stepped out of politics, I would suggest perhaps for but one election cycle, but stepped aside so Poilievre could run in his riding. Remember, he won with like 83% of the vote. So the odds are stacked against the other candidates. That's all I'm saying. That doesn't mean they couldn't win. It may be unlikely. We love unlikely stories. You know, we love the stories of, like they call that, you know, the Cinderella story, the underdog story. We love those.
That is the story everyone loves. And you're not wrong to, like, you know, to say, you know, who you think is probably going to win an election. You're not wrong to, like, have a little foresight. But I mean, if we're influencing your vote in this small area of the province, I don't know. I don't know if that's happening. But Bonnie, like, on the show, I mean, that's kind of, I want politicians to be, I want them to be a little different, have some character, be true and loyal to the place they're from, care about their neighbors. I felt like she had all of that. But I do agree with this long ballot. She's now kind of, you know, that's going to be a negative effect on her. Unless, you know, B and C, whether they list the first name or last, she's near the top at least.
Well, I feel like most people go in, you know, you walk into that gymnasium or wherever you're going to vote, and I think you have a general sense of who you're voting for. You either know the candidate's name or you know what party you're going to vote for, right? Like typically, I think it's that simple. And in this case, you'll have motivated voters showing up, and you'll see the results on this, right? Like if you have 108 minimum candidates, they say they're going to try to get it to 200, which is, you know, to be honest, it drives me nuts. It's democracy. They can do what they want. Like you said, you can't cap. And you can't really cap something like this, because what if it is people in good faith, like, you know, in a mayoral race, or people that want to run for school trustee or whatever it is. You know, the more people engaged in democracy, the better, but in good faith, right? This is citizen activism. Everything that they're doing is legal, but it's not in good faith, if you know what I mean. And so I think that this does hurt independents like Bonnie. And it's not even so much like you're alluding to, you know, people. It's not that people don't recognize names or they can't figure out how things are alphabetized or what have you. But I think it's the fact, like what she spelled out in her open letter, where she says, you're kind of like drawing and dragging all of us into this big circle where the average person is going to assume that anybody not named Pierre Poilievre is in cahoots. Right? Like if there's 200 people on this ballot, there's like 199 people that are all banding together with the same goal. And that's certainly not Bonnie's goal. And if you want to learn more about what her goal actually is, and I'm not endorsing her and I'm not promoting her, I'm just saying she's a fascinating person, a military veteran, a rancher. She lives there. She's from there. Our home, our riding is her slogan. If you want to learn what she's all about, check out the interview that we did with her. It's like 45 minutes. You can, wherever you get your podcasts, you can watch it on our YouTube channel as well. But that, to me, is the type of person you want to draw into politics. Somebody that is from the riding that they're going to represent, somebody that knows the people there, and somebody that's drawn into it for all the right reasons. So, you know, you can let us know what you think on this. Ms. KD says, for example, you only need 100 signatures. Maybe that should be increased. I would support that. I would say if you can't get 500 signatures on a nomination paper, then you probably have no business running. If you can't get 500 people, if you can't knock on doors and prove how serious you are, and that's not you that has to go get the 500. If you can't get a team together to get 500 signatures or maybe 1,000 signatures, then maybe you don't belong on the ballot in the first place. You know, of course, the Poilievre camp says that this needs to be reviewed. Let me try to, you know, I want to see if I can quote this story directly, because they've obviously spoken on this. This in an interview with Darren Major from CBC News. But Poilievre's team obviously not thrilled about this. During a town hall meeting in the riding last week, the Conservative leader said that he wanted election rules to be changed to prevent more long ballot protests. I mean, this is the guy that's been targeted by them twice. Says Poilievre, quote, "We have to take action because this is a scam. It's unfair, it's unjust, and it must stop. Parliament responsible for making any changes, although Elections Canada is the arm's length body that enforces the Canada Elections Act." I don't know if it's a scam. I understand why he's pissed off, but technically, I don't know if it's a scam. Technically, I don't know if it's unfair, because it kind of targets, I mean, all the candidates get screwed by it, right? I don't know if it's unjust, but I can understand why it would be annoying. With regards to whether or not it must stop, I would agree, quite frankly, with Pierre Poilievre. I don't think it's what we want to see in our elections. But like we said, what they're doing is not illegal.
No, and I just said I don't like it either. I think it's tomfoolery. I love using the tomfoolery word today, but
what do we have? Knickknacks, bits and bites, tomfoolery.
But like, what's the opposite? Like when you hear Pierre Poilievre talking like that, like we can't restrict who's going to run and say you have to be this, that, you have to have this amount of money. That's an even slipperier slope.
I think Ms.
Than having to find someone's name alphabetically. And you hit it on the head as well, what you just said. Most people, the majority, I would think 95% of people don't go in there and say, I'm going to look at all the names and Google on my phone or pick the name I like the best. They already know who they're looking for to vote on the list, whether it's 6 names, 5 names, 2 names, or 1,000. They know what they're scrolling down to and which box they're checking. So I think it's a non-issue, but at the same time, I do think it's a little ridiculous, but I think it is. I agree. It's a form of protest, and we need that, right? We need that. We need to see when people oppose things.
Yeah, absolutely. Anubis, who is it? I'm gonna blow the quote, but no, I'm gonna save it until I can deliver the quote correctly. I'll get it to you in the next 5 minutes. Anubius says a long ballot didn't seem to hurt Bruce Fanjoy, who knocked off Poilievre in the home riding.
I was just going to say,
people found his name just fine. He says, I think those constituents just didn't want Poilievre.
I would love to see some research on when long ballots have actually worked, because I don't think they do work, right? Like, I think Pierre would have lost that riding whether there was 6 names or 100, right? So I would love to see some research on when long ballots have affected, someone who was supposed to take the riding or take an election negatively. So
the quote I was looking for, which and now I'm learning a little bit more about it as I research here, it sounds like it has been misattributed to Voltaire. Who, by the way, was the pen name of Francois-Marie Arouet, who died in 1778. But the quote, I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Yeah, and that's something, kind of the idea of, I may not like it, but if you're, within your rights and within the law, I can permit it.
I think you're not the first person to utter that quote on a podcast, and I can pick out the podcasts that I've probably heard that said on.
Yeah. David T says the Conservatives are blatantly taking for granted the voters in Battle River Crowfoot. I'd be insulted if this was happening in my riding. Poilievre lost his seat. He should have resigned. I don't know.
I think you're right in that they voted Conservative always. I agree with you. I don't think it's gonna sway it, but I still could see some people voting and being like, this isn't the likely option I wanted. Yeah. I didn't want someone from Ottawa coming in and taking Damien's seat, who I gave a mandate just recently. I think even the people it's pissing off, it's likely they're still going to vote blue.
Well, Bonnie even said that, right? Like she didn't go so far as to say, I asked her a very rude question in the interview, and I asked her how she voted in the last election. We typically don't ask that of guests. Some of them volunteer it.
She didn't say.
But she didn't say.
It
sounded like. We can surmise, and this is pure speculation, but it sounded like she's been a lifelong conservative. I know a lot of people are calling her like a lefty and a left-wing activist and all this kind of wild stuff. But she basically says, people in our riding are choked. They're choked at Keurig. They're choked at him for stepping aside and letting, in her words, the angry guy from Ottawa come in here. But Justin is also not wrong at all. And he says they sure are getting you guys talking about the issue. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. So mission accomplished. Some of you are, getting into whether or not Pierre Poilievre should have resigned after the most recent election. I would probably more refer you to our episodes right after the federal election. You can find those in our podcast archives, wherever you watch, including on YouTube as well. We debate that. I mean, there were, I'm not a Conservative Party member. I'm not a member of any political party, but there were some high watermarks. There were some wins for the Conservatives in that election that you can point to, right? Like they received a ton of votes. They won some ridings. They turned the tide. They gained like 20 seats. So there were some positives. They just didn't win the election. And it felt like the writing was on the wall there. This was going to be a clean sweep if Trudeau was on the ballot. And when Carney came in, you all know how that worked out. And also, obviously, the optics of Pierre losing his own riding are tough. But I do think you could make the argument, if you were a Conservative, if you're a conservative leader, if you're Pierre Poilievre, you can make the writing that he probably deserves another shot at it. But optically, I would imagine behind the scenes, even though he's putting on a brave face, he's talking tough, it's probably, obviously, especially for your ego, politicians, talk show hosts, driven by ego. We can all acknowledge that. Many of us driven by a sense of what we have accomplished, or driven by a sense of the influence that we have, or a sense of the contribution that we make. When the electorate says no to you, I would imagine that's a tough one to deal with.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think he will win this, but if he doesn't, it's over. I mean, even now when he tweets or when he puts out a post, it's not hitting the same, Ryan, as before. We would pay so much more attention. Now we're concerned with other things. We're concerned with Trump. We're concerned with what's going on in the world and tariffs and how our current prime minister is dealing with it. And now I see his posts. I used to read all the comments, see where people's opinions were. Now I'm kind of like, he's kind of like the guy in the back in the Adam Sandler movie,
No, I need the reference.
You can do it.
You can do it, Rob Schneider.
It's just kind of like a faint voice in the background that is still trying to be relevant. So, I do agree that he probably is going to win this, most likely.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't, it's kind of at the end game. Right?
By the way, Johnny, for those of you, this may be off your radar. Those of you keeping track don't need the reminder. We are 3 days away from the release of Happy Gilmore 2.
I can't wait.
Days away. We want to get into this Jasper situation. And obviously, when I say that, I guess you could say, well, which one? The entire town. It's my understanding is a somber and solemn week in Jasper. Probably also some celebratory elements as they recognize, commemorate the 1-year anniversary of that wildfire. We've got a special episode coming up on the 24th of July on this Thursday. But we want to get into the dust that Alberta's Premier is kicking up on this, the response from Jasper's Mayor in just a quick second. Reporting by Matthew Skase out of Jasper in the Globe and Mail. But before we do, I want to make sure that the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce is on your radar. They've got a couple of events happening. Speaking of the 24th of July, that's when they've got their Chamber VIP Lounge happening at the Taste of Edmonton. Of course, this annual festival in Edmonton's downtown core, a signature food festival. You can soak it up from the Edmonton Chamber's private VIP Lounge. That's Thursday, July 24th at Winston Churchill Square. Your ticket will include lounge access. It's also going to include 2 adult beverages and some savory eats. You can register, sign up at edmontonchamber.com. Just click on the events link. They've got Spice Brothers there, Paraiso Tropical, all while you're mingling with business leaders, enjoying live music as well. And coming up the very next day, Friday the 25th of July, Coffee with the Chamber. And this one sounds like a lot of fun. You get to go hang out where Johnny Infamous is spinning tunes at Elks home games. How cool is this? Coffee on the sidelines of Commonwealth Stadium, hosted by Edmonton's CFL club, the Edmonton Elks. A chance to network from the exclusive field level lounge. Enjoy surprise fan experiences. Enter to win Elks swag, including a VIP suite package. Members to this event get early bird access, so you can register today for Coffee with the Chamber, Friday, July 25th, by visiting their website, edmontonchamber.com. A shout out to our friends at North Road Investment Council. Of course, they're working around the year, but they recognize that summer is an interesting time for many successful Canadians who will pause and reflect on their career and maybe more particularly their retirement goals. At North Road Investment Council, they work with Canadians who've done just that, building successful careers. And now you want to ensure that your wealth is being organized to deliver a successful retirement. The typical North Road client has at least $2 million in investable assets coming from analytical, detail-driven professions. We're talking about you, dentists, architects, engineers. The team at North Road would love to open a conversation with you and talk about what makes them different, including their digital risk advisory, by the way. You can check out their website, northroadic.com, to start a conversation built on clarity, discipline, and true alignment. And Johnny, I'm putting you on the spot. Johnny on the spot. Is there a way you can throw up the video of my UCAN Youth Services tour from the other day? We just wanted to recognize this Edmonton-based nonprofit charitable organization. We're so thrilled. I'm excited I can finally tell you about their new location. They closed on it literally a week and a half ago. Just got the keys. This was day one. If you know Edmonton, this is right across 104th Ave from Grant MacEwan University. They're close to Norquest. They're close to a bunch of different post-secondaries, which is perfect. Because what they do, in particular for 18 to 24-year-old young adults that are maybe, quite frankly, right now in harm's way or, on a path that's not the most productive, well, they connect them with educational and employment resources. You can learn more at ucan.ca, but this beautiful downtown location, which they've worked years to make happen, is going to allow them to double their service offerings, which is huge. They're going to double the number of lives that they can change, and the proof of performance is obvious. If you connect with UCAN, you'll figure this out firsthand. I mean, they're changing lives one at a time, them and their team, their incredible team of counselors, of outreach workers. We're thrilled to be working with UCAN and helping them raise the funds that are going to help them operate this location for years and years to come. If you're interested in learning more about this life-changing organization, the legacy of Kyle Dubé, the present-day leadership, and basically the future direction here, you can check out their website, ucan.ca. They're always looking for corporate partners. If you're hiring in an entry-level position, you want a workforce that's reliable, that's motivated, comes with life experience. Can't put a price on that. That can be tough to find with this labor crunch we're experiencing. You can check out UCAN Youth Services. You never know when you might establish that beautiful relationship. I love this from Kenzie. Kenzie, it fills my heart. Says, I can't wait to see that UCAN space filled with people making positive changes. I love that, Kenzie. I feel the exact same way. And we're going to keep you updated on that. We've got some roundtables planned. I haven't even told you about this. This tariff talk, it kind of flares up and then drops. And then the president of the United States will make a comment about 35 or 50% tariffs, what have you.
Well, the 35's coming.
And
right?
then
For sure.
it sort of is on our radar again. We're working on a roundtable, which is going to be really neat. It's we'll probably find a more professional name for it, but basically a booze roundtable where we're going to bring somebody in the wine industry. We're going to bring somebody in the craft beer industry and somebody in the spirits industry and talk to them about how this is impacting them. These are, businesses in many cases operating on lean profit margins that see huge opportunities with these interprovincial trade barriers dropping, or at least that's what we're expecting to see from the premiers. But I think it's kind of an interesting, we've done an agriculture interpretation of it before. Obviously, you could talk to people in home building. Tariffs hit them hard. Anybody in steel manufacturing, that's obviously a big one, but we'll look forward to that roundtable before the end of the summer. That's coming up. This story we'll keep an eye on. We're watching it now, and obviously this is one that we'll talk about for the entirety of our July 24th episode. The Premier of Alberta demanding an apology, basically, for a report that suggests that the province meddling as Jasper was burning and in the short period of time after interfered with firefighting efforts. Premier Danielle Smith, quite frankly, pissed about it. Jasper's Mayor Richard Ireland standing by the wildfire report, and he says he's not concerned with Jasper's relationship with the province. You're going to hear from Mayor Ireland right out of the gates, live streaming 8:30 Mountain Time on the 24th. You'll hear it in his own words here on the show, but recording. I want to reference this reporting in the Globe and Mail. Again, this is Matthew Skase with photography by Amber Bracken, a good friend of ours. The mayor saying he stands by a report commissioned by the town that criticizes Danielle Smith's response to that wildfire that destroyed, this is always wild when you hear it put like this, a third of that Rocky Mountain community, the beautiful community of Jasper. The Premier demanding that the report be retracted. She wants an apology from the town, says Mayor Ireland, quote, "We don't doubt the report at all." He says the report is the report. He made these comments less than 24 hours ago. Says the report is the report. It was not intended to ascribe blame. It does not ascribe blame, and it is not a political instrument. And our regret, anytime a politician says it like this, they are politicking. This is diplomacy. He says our regret is that it's been used as a political instrument. He reiterates that this was an independent report commissioned by the town, says it's been misrepresented and was never intended to be, quote, a political document. This report surveyed frontline firefighters and other officials to determine ways to improve future fire responses. You would expect to see a report commissioned when a disaster like this strikes. In fact, if there was not a report commissioned, you might wonder what the hell was going on. What did we learn from this? Where could we do better? Where did we nail it? Who deserves recognition? Who deserves to be called to the carpet or course corrected, right? And part of this report determined that the province's interference disrupted the focus of fighting the fires. Now, of course, the fire occurred in a national park, so the Alberta government was not responsible to lead the incident, but the report reiterates that the province regularly asked for information and sought to exercise decision-making authority. And it concludes that the jurisdictional overlap created political challenges that disrupted the focus of incident commanders. So we'll get more of an insider's take. We'll go directly to the source on this, to Mayor Ireland, coming up in a couple of episodes. I think that the timing of Danielle Smith's demand for an apology is very curious. I think that it's, I'm going to basically call it a self-inflicted political wound, because I can't imagine that leading up to the 1-year anniversary of a devastating natural disaster like a wildfire impacting one of Canada's, and I refer to this town like this every single Wednesday as part of my Jasper memories, as one of Canada's crown jewels, right? Populated by tourism professionals from around the world, quite frankly, and many incredible entrepreneurs, as well as lifelong residents of Jasper, to demand an apology from the town, from the mayor, leading up to the 1-year anniversary of the fire is a curious move to me. And I also think that at the time it was obvious, and people were making these points. You can look back to our episodes in late July of last year. We talked to Alberta's Premier. She was in the back of an SUV on the way to Hinton. We talked to Mayor Ireland. We talked to Councillor Wendy Hall at the time. We talked to other stakeholders. We talked to Tyler Riopel of Tourism Jasper. And we'll be speaking to many of those individuals and some new faces coming up on the 24th. But there was that understanding. And a lot of people were alluding to the fact that, the feds were withholding water bombers, or that the province would do a better job, or the province was being stopped from participating. This is a matter of jurisdiction, and the report reiterates the fact that a fire in a national park is not the jurisdiction of the provincial government. But this has kind of been a theme with this provincial government. It's a very interesting scenario, right? We talked to Michael Walters about this in our most recent episode on the 21st of July. The infrastructure minister, the provincial infrastructure minister, Devin Dreeshen, saying that the province is actively reviewing plans for bike lanes in the major cities in Calgary and Edmonton. I mean, quite frankly, and yes, the province funds much of the infrastructure in cities because that's how it works. Cities don't have another option. The province is the gatekeeper of those funds. Dreeshen's position, at least the one that he's putting publicly, says we're not going to invest hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in expanding transportation infrastructure, roads, highways, and the like, in a rapidly growing province like Alberta, while at the same time, and I'm paraphrasing here, watching families basically restrict restrict traffic flow to accommodate bike lanes. That's the province's position. Well, at the end of the day, is this really the province's job, right? Michael, a play on words yesterday, basically said, the province should probably stay in its lane on this one. But this isn't the first instance, right? You look at other instances where the province has inserted itself. The province wants all federal funds to municipalities to go across the Premier's desk. They don't want to see deals struck between the feds and municipalities directly. The province wants to oversee what's happening in the major cities on a number of different fronts. There have been many comments, and some of them are fair comments about concerns around violent crime in city cores, including in the city of Edmonton. However, at the end of the day, is that the province's jurisdiction? The province has talked about harm reduction measures in the cities, right? Defunding some supervised consumption sites, doubling down on funding for things like detox, which is important. We've reiterated that before. But when you're talking about staying in your lane, right? Danielle Smith and the UCP demands that the Liberal federal government stay in its lane on basically everything, but they're not practicing what they preach. Right? And the talk of tariffs. Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith, Ontario's Premier Doug Ford doing the exact same thing, and to a lesser degree, I think, Saskatchewan's Premier Scott Moe, but doing direct advocacy with trade partners, political affiliates, and the like stateside. Is that staying in your lane? We can debate that all the time. But this is a government that has, especially through the course of the federal election, and this was an indictment from conservatives following the federal election that felt that Danielle Smith had been hurting Pierre Poilievre's chances by taking more of the headlines than Poilievre was gleaning through that critical time of the campaign period. So I think it's an interesting position, and I'm putting that lightly. I think it's a very curious position. I think it's probably, politically speaking, a regrettable position. for Danielle Smith to demand an apology from the town of Jasper for the findings of an independent report. We'll get more from Mayor Ireland, Richard Ireland, on the 24th, but we'd also be curious to hear from you, Real Talkers, to talk@RyanJespersen.com. You can let us know what you think, or, of course, you can always leave a comment on our YouTube episode. We look to our email inbox and our YouTube comments as we get set to fire up our flamethrower. That's the final episode of every single week, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. If you've got a hot take, if you want to throw a little heat, if you want to put something in front of the most engaged talk audience in the country, send us an email to talk@RyanJespersen.com, or you can leave a comment on our YouTube episodes. We did get a comment here, a very nice email from Dr. Colin down in Calgary following our episode yesterday. And I wanted to wrap with this, Johnny, just to share a bouquet with you, but just wanted to let you know how much, Colin, we appreciated this. He said, I just wanted to extend a sincere congratulations to you and Johnny for the incredible milestone of 1,000 episodes. He says, unbelievable. Says, I've been here since the very first episode. He says, I'm now a proud Patreon and YouTube supporter. Colin, a physician, says, I've learned so much and enjoyed it so thoroughly. Some incredible guests and perspectives I needed to hear. He says, Real Talk is now in rare company, and he says, the wild thing is, I think you guys are just getting going. He says, this could get so much bigger. We share your enthusiasm. He says, Max Fawcett is my favorite guest. My favorite episode is when you had Jeremy Allen on, speaking of grief. And this was, by the way, many of you referenced our episode on June 6th of last year after my pal passed away, our episode titled How to Grieve. This was a Jeremy Allen episode like a year before that. This had nothing to do with my buddy Laws. But Colin's referencing an episode where Jeremy Allen spoke of grief. I don't know if you remember this, but Jeremy was scheduled to join us, and his dog had passed away the night before.
I remember.
The night before the interview, his dog passed away, and we reached out to him, and I said, Jeremy, we can reschedule the interview. I saw his Instagram post. I said, we're so sorry for your loss. We can reschedule. He said, nope. He said, if we're going to talk about grief, we'll make space for me to grieve. And it was a very powerful episode. Colin says that resonated with him as well. But there are so many to think back on. He says, here's to the next 1,000. That from Dr. Colin down in Calgary. Wanted to thank you for that. As we wrap this episode, again, we want to thank you for your engagement and encourage you to keep in touch. If there's something you're not hearing on the show you'd love to see us tackle, let us know. If you'd like to see some follow-up, maybe Dr. Andy Knight said something today that really resonated with you, let us know. Tomorrow, we're going to be asking Sabine Benoit, what's actually causing the housing crisis in Canada? A year ago, she wrote for the National Post, said it's not immigrants. We'll see where she pins it down. We'll talk to you then.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Kandola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out RyanJespersen.com.